can't do it alone. That's what I've been doing for years. I didn't want to ask for help. And it's really hard for me to ask for help. And I think that that's part of my recovery program is asking for help. When we start dealing with the pain, then the compulsion really does diminish. We're really our own best therapist.
What's going on, Reboot team? It is your Reboot Hero Chris coming at you with yet another testimonial from somebody coming to us from our exclusive Reboot Implementation Program. I have the pleasure, we were just chatting a little bit before we started recording, somebody with a lot of experience, a lot of insights, and someone who honestly, I'm excited to get to know a little bit because he's been making some significant strides in his own reboot. I'm here speaking with Dave. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. Good to have you on the call. I want to start from the very, very beginning. As far as how you first got in contact with the program, how did you first discover it?
Well, I've been looking at a couple different online recovery coaching programs, and I didn't really approach Porn Reboot initially for a porn addiction because my biggest trigger was alcohol. And so I was looking for how can I, get into recovery. But the essential elements I was looking for was the integration of trauma, neuroscience. Many of the recovery programs out there don't add that layer. And then the whole aspect of the mindset. I mean, what the coaches bring to the table, the package was attractive and interesting. And then secondly, I did follow JK on some of his emails, and then Dave, the other reboot coach, kind of had a engaging interview with me. So I was just looking at what would be because I think addiction is a cluster of symptoms, and I don't really think the behavior or the substance is the issue. It's the thinking that goes behind it. And I think Elevation Recovery and the Reboot program brings together the best elements of an addictive, compulsive recovery program.
That's awesome. And I agree with you, first of all, 100%. And that's something that took a while for me to learn when I was in the Reboot program myself. Like, I thought I was just here to kind of learn how to do away with a particular unhealthy behavior. But the longer you stick around, it's sort of, I've sort of used this quote, and it kind of touches upon what you were talking about. It's not the thing, meaning it's not the behavior, it's not the substance, like you said, whatever the compulsion is, it's the place where it's coming from.
Right.
The thoughts that sort of influence the action. If you kind of get to the roots, you kind of have a better chance of making the tree as healthy as it can be. Right. No, that's the process in a nutshell. So, and I'm curious, you doing your own research, trying to find groups and stuff, you join the Reboot program, you're in it, you're locked in. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, what's been your experience, for example, with the Facebook community?
I'm not a huge Facebook guy. I do stay in touch and look at the posts and what other guys are saying. And I think we've talked about this before. I'm a little bit from maybe a generational standpoint. I don't like, sometimes I feel like a 4-year-old with a coloring book. Look at this. Did I do good? Did I do good? I don't know about that. And I like the affirmation, but the resources and some of the clips like from Coach Milan and some of the clips that you put together, and this is what it looks like, or this is the process. That one where Coach Milan and you went through the circle of excellence. I mean, actually watching someone go through it and seeing what the outcome is really helped me understand the objective of the tool. So that's why I like the Facebook group.
That's so good.
Oh, and then there was another time where recently, like I was right on the verge of a slip. It was really intense. And so I reached out to my AP, I reached out and I just posted what I was going through on the Facebook group. And it was really powerful the way that just kind of extinguished the thunderstorm in my head. And that's when I realized that I was starting to heal, because I would never have reached out for help before. I mean, that was the first time I ever did. And I kind of came away from that experience saying that worked. And so that's the other aspect of the Facebook group and the AP that in my recovery was really kind of transformational. It was really your stock went up a couple notches on that one.
I am sure it did, and I saw that it did. That's really, really cool. And that's sort of a nice segue into something you touched upon, the coaching calls. We were talking a little bit about that before we started recording, but yeah, I mean, overall, how has your experience been like with the coaching calls overall?
Well, I make the coaching calls a priority. I make time for that, even if I'm on the road or whatever. As far as I'm concerned, Dr. Eastman is a rock star. I mean, I've talked to four different trauma informed therapists over the years. I was involved in healthcare and became aware of the impact of trauma. But what Dr. Eastman brings to the table is she's in a different league. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Coach Milan's mindset, that was that paradigm shift. How can we reframe this? That's huge. And of course, breaking the cycle is one of my favorite calls that you, you assume people read the book and are doing the work. Yeah, but what I found over the years that unless you sit down with someone, we both got the book open at the same page. We're talking about this. What does it mean? What does it say? How do I implement that? That's a whole different level of engagement that passively reading a book does not bring to the table. So, and again, as I mentioned earlier, it was the coaching and the multidisciplinary approach to recovery that I chose Porn Reboot as opposed to some substance abuse recovery program.
Right. No, and there is, like you said, more of like a multidisciplinary approach. It's kind of more holistic. It's not like we lead you. And the thing is, like, we can't tell you how to be the best you. Our goal is to kind of give you the facilitation and the tools for you to draw your own conclusion. And then our job from there is kind of hold you accountable to that end result.
Well, it's the neuroscience and it's the current technology and research coming to the table. That is, and then understanding neuroplasticity and how, for example, pornography rewired your brain. It's like, yes, sure, right. But then in the modules that JK does and unpacking that, and then actually talking to someone who specializes in neuroscience and how to rewire that brain and how to build a new habit, that takes it out of the realm of willpower and it brings it into the realm of this is a biological, physiological event.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you don't feel the I'm immoral, I'm unclean, I'm impure. It's like, oh wow, my brain actually adapted to my maladaptive responses to stress.
Yeah, no, and hence it's more than just one thing going on, you
Right.
know. So I love that you touched on that. And kind of on that wavelength, I'm curious, at least so far, we're far from a finished product, all of us, but I am curious as far as changes you may have noticed in your own self compared to when you first started, having implemented what you've implemented so far, having learned what you've learned so far, your experience up to this point. Have you noticed any changes in yourself?
Yeah, I think one of the goals, or at least the goal in any recovery program, or and I think Reboot fits in this, is what is your definition of sobriety? I'm also working a 12-step group too. And so it's not abstinence from the substance or the behavior. It's can we be emotionally sober? What does emotional sobriety look like? And so prior to the program, just about every day, certainly every week, I was engaged in some type of addictive behavior. I have a few of them. And so the reboot process and the tools has given me weeks of sobriety. And then one of the things, like for example, I didn't think was an issue was resentment. And because I don't consider myself a resentful person, and most people wouldn't look at me as a bitter, angry person, but using the tools and getting a better understanding, because now that you're doing the feelings exercises and now that you're becoming a little bit more aware of how it affects you physically, I never paid attention to that stuff before. And what I've learned is uh, I am a resentful person, and that resentment is one of the engines of my addictive behavior. Because I just want to shut it off. I want to get numb. I don't want to think about it anymore. Just I know how to stop it
Mm.
through an addictive behavior. But the tools and the daily disciplines and the structure have really helped me understand that. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's that iceberg picture. It's like what, and then it's kind of like underneath the surface, is like what you don't know, and then deeper below, it's like what you don't know, you don't know. You
Yeah,
know?
and that's what's driving the behavior is what's below the surface. And we really don't take time to, because it does. That's the other thing about the reboot process. I would say is that when I got involved in the program, I was a little bit overwhelmed, and we talked about this about how much time it takes to do all this stuff, and having to prioritize and having to carve out the time investment as well as the financial investment. So I would say my reboot probably taken me a good 2.5 hours a day, and And I think that if I did it all perfectly, it would probably be closer to a 4 hour commitment, which I can't do. But and that's one of the reasons why even though I'm making progress and making traction in one area, there's like two or three things in the toolbox that Reboot brings to the table that, gee, I wish I invested more time or could invest more time in those other tools.
I appreciate you speaking on that, but again, it's a process. There's the phrase that we overuse in the group, but for a good reason, progress over perfection. And I love what you said earlier. You could kind of beat yourself up for perhaps not achieving as much as you think you should, or not being on a level you feel you should be at. It's really starting to embrace that overall motto and that overall idea of progress, process over perfection.
Got it.
Perfection's a farce, right? Like it's
Well, this thing is like, again, I'm making an investment. So I want to get the greatest return on my investment. And I haven't, it's like I've got this 7 course meal that I'm still working on the appetizers and the soup and the salad. I want to get the steak. I want to get it done. But again, I think that's also part of the compulsive mindset.
That's okay. That is good too. It's part of the compulsive mindset to feel you need to eat the 7 course meal all in one bite, or at least all in one sitting. There's value pace. And that's what we can help you out with. But I appreciate that perspective because it's so valid and actually kind of a nice segue again into a question that I like to ask on a call like this. Essentially, let's say somebody is sort of staring at that proverbial 7 course meal like, oh my God. And in other words, they're in this place where they kind of feel they have a mountain to climb in terms of overcoming a behavior that they feel shameful about, and they're trying to figure things out on their own, perhaps, and in the process, kind of suffering in silence in a way that you and I know about very well. My question essentially would be if this person hypothetically were to confide in you and let about this stuff, someone close to you perhaps, they share that, hey, I'm really struggling with a compulsive behavior. Having learned what you've learned so far, and again, what you've experienced up until this point, is there anything in particular that you would want to share with that person?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is you can't do it alone. And that's what I've been doing for years. Just, and that's just white knuckling it. It's just like I didn't want to ask for help. And it's really hard for me to ask for help. And I think that that's part of my recovery program is asking for help. And you've mentioned this, it's kind of like a team sport. And the other thing too is that, she said something, it was kind of like, tell them everything, but don't tell them everything. And that was really in one of the 12 steps. There's a step that's very similar to that, except to do so would cause someone harm. So you can't do it alone. And then I would encourage them, if it was for a porn addiction, you got to check these guys out. We've been so conditioned, or at least I've been conditioned. You don't wear your feelings on your sleeve. Emotions are awkward, cumbersome, burdensome. And to be honest with you, I get kind of weary about having to deal with the emotional stuff. I'm just tired of talking about it or thinking about it. But on the other hand, especially from the neuroscience stamp, in that the body keeps score, Dr. Eastman's somatic approach, and also pacing, you can't force feed yourself. It's like trying to drink water out of a fire hose. When you start getting overwhelmed, you got to back off and take a breath. And then there's a part of you says, well, I wish I could just go through this. And then the other part of you is like, oh, I'm stuck. And prior to the program, prior to recovery, I didn't have the vocabulary or the tools to understand what stuckness meant.
That's so good. And yeah, and to that point, it's like a lot of this program is essentially supplying you with the dictionary to give you that vocabulary. It's like, oh, that's what's going on. Now let me see if I could use this new vocabulary to start telling a new story. So that's really, really good. I love that. But in that spirit, sort of a follow-up question, would you then recommend this program to this person?
Sure. Absolutely. Especially if it was a porn addiction. But like most guys, I've worked in education, healthcare, and ministry for over 25 years. Most guys don't talk about their porn addiction. I remember, and this would have been like maybe in the late 90s. It's like the big deal with porn, or the same thing with drinking. Well, just stop. What's the problem? And then, so I would think over the years, out of hundreds of men I've known, I would say maybe only a dozen would actually talk about it. And in that case, maybe one or two are actually affected their marriage and their relationship. So insofar as porn being a presenting issue, it's kind of rare, especially people who want to talk about it. But when you talk about alcohol, when you talk about substance abuse, that's much, much more common. It's just that it's hard to find an integrative approach that. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is porn wasn't the presenting issue. It was an issue, but it wasn't the big issue. And I recognize that the addictive compulsive behavior was a cluster of symptoms. It was like they were all connected to each other. And so that's why when someone tries to stop smoking, okay, they start eating. It's like we switch addictions as opposed to really dealing with the compulsive mindset. And really, Gabor Mate, who I think is a world class on addiction, he wrote a book, Hungry Ghosts. He's the first one who really, instead of saying, what's the problem, he was the one who said, where's the pain? And when we start dealing with the pain, then the compulsion really does diminish. And that's what I like about the integrative approach of Porn Reboot.
So good. I mean, this is what essentially is meant by living with life on life's terms. Whether it comes to those heavy duty emotions, what have you, or at least emotions we have or had been conditioned to feel we need to run away from or shy away from or just have become a little uncomfortable. It's about sitting with them and realizing that they're a part of us, just like our pinky is.
Well, you're right. The acceptance of the anger, resentment, and then fear, and then like the sex drive. Those are huge appetites, and those are like it's almost like a storm. And we grew up saying, well, just keep it under control, or at least don't let anybody else know what's going on. And then as we get older, those coping mechanisms that were helpful back then now become destructive or certainly unhealthy. And then you don't know how to get out of it because they've always been your go-to self-soothing behaviors, and to realize that there's something more to that. And even the whole concept of accepting life on life's terms. Grant me the serenity that accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That last line, the wisdom part, we don't get trained in that.
Mm. No, that's good. And in this program, we are given like the facilitation and again the tools to be able to decipher that, to be able to kind of build that wisdom muscle in the sense of awareness and then ultimately taking action.
Well, it's one thing you said is that, I'm pretty sure you said it, is that we're really our own best therapist because what works for us might not work for somebody else. And so the tools give us the insight as to where or what needs to be resolved. And prior to the tools, it's like your mind was a snow globe with all these data bits floating around, and it's like you can't even catch them. But again, with the insight and then with the coaching or an AP, you're able to put some things together and say, well, have you looked at this? Have you tried this? Tell me what this looks like. And that's where the program, the coaches and the Facebook group and the tools help us be our own best therapist.
Absolutely. It again, it's really, really learning about kind of how to check underneath your, you
Yeah.
know, hood. That's so good. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. And I know it's just going to be of immense value. But before we call it a day, any final thoughts, any parting words for someone who is still, again, maybe in the trenches right now and kind of on the fence of whether or not to join this program or just dealing with an out of control behavior?
Sure. My last comment would be, and we talked about this before, when I was first approaching the program and Dave was talking to me, like, what are you going to do? Kind of like the ask, or this is how much it's going to cost, and it's going to take you years. Okay. The amount of money and the amount of time was really off-putting. I just couldn't do that. And then I think it was a week or two afterwards, JK sent me an email. And it was right before the end of the year. And maybe he was doing it for an end of the year promotion. I don't know. But it was after Christmas, before New Year's. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you want to do it, I'll give you 3 months and at a reduced price. And that gave me the opportunity. And I think I told you this, but if I'm going to buy a car, I am going to look under the hood. I am going to kick the tires. I am going to take it on a test drive. And so for me to justify the investment, that 90-day option, I mean, that was huge. That was huge that JK made that offer. And it was kind of like he respected my need, I'll say need, to justify the investment. So that's what I would say to anybody who's considering joining the program.
Well, appreciate your insight again. Dave, thank you so much. And yeah, just all the best to you, all the continued success.